I will never be able to forget what I saw this morning. My husband James was in our bedroom with my daughter-in-law to be Sophia. It wasn't just a kiss. It was a full scene of intimacy that left me frozen at the door, unable to move. As I was about to turn back, I saw my son Ricardo in the hallway. His face was white as a ghost. "Mom," he whispered. "They do this all the time, and there's something else you don't know." But before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching this video from. We love to see how far our stories reach. My name is Grace. I'm 64 years old, and I thought I was living the best years of my life. Together with James, we had set up a small inn in Key West, Florida, and after decades of hard work, it had finally started to do business. Our son Liam, 35 years old, had returned from Portugal after completing his master's degree in gastronomy and had finished the preparations to marry Sophia, a young chef he met there. That Friday in June, there were 2 weeks left until the wedding. The flower arrangements had been chosen, the menu finalized, and the invitations had reached their destinations. I woke up early, as always, to prepare breakfast for the guests. Our inn is small. It has only 9 rooms, but we pride ourselves on personal attention. As the smell of homemade bread spread through the kitchen, I had put the water on for coffee. Sophia had arrived last night for the final adjustments to the dress. She was staying in the guest room of the main house, separate from the inn building. Liam would stay in his apartment in the city until the wedding, and then they would be together. James, who normally helped me with breakfast, was strangely absent that morning. He was nowhere to be seen. He's probably dealing with some plumbing issue, I thought to myself. He is always fixing things and is good at it. I finished preparing the fruit trays and wanted to go look for him. The house was quiet. There was only the sound of silence coming faintly from the corridors that led to the rooms. I thought maybe Sophia was awake and talking to James about the wedding preparations. As I got closer, I realized the voices were coming from the bedroom. The door was ajar. I felt that something stopped me before I knocked. Maybe the tone of the voices, maybe an instinct I didn't know I had. Through the crack, I saw something I never imagined I would see in my entire life. James was sitting on the edge of the bed. Sophia was standing between his legs. His hands were on Sophia's waist under the silk robe I had given her as a welcome to the family gift. They were kissing, with a familiarity that suggested it wasn't the first time. "The guests arrive in an hour," James whispered. I knew that tone of his voice well after so many years. "We can't dawdle, just a bit more," Sophia replied, unbuttoning his shirt. "Liam won't be back until evening." Hearing my son's name come out of her mouth while my husband touched her stabbed my chest like a knife. Instinctively, I stepped back. I covered my mouth to stifle the sound that was about to break out. At that moment, I noticed Liam standing silently at the end of the hallway. When our eyes met, there was a mutual and devastating moment of understanding. He knew. He had found out too, and from the look on his face, he had known for some time. With his hands, he silently gestured for me to come to the back terrace, somewhere James and Sophia couldn't hear. My legs were shaking so much I could barely walk. When we stepped into the sunny morning air, silent tears were streaming down my face. "How long have you known?" I asked. My voice sounded foreign even to me. "3 months," Liam said. His voice was calm, controlled, but his eyes showed a deep, great pain. "I found messages on her phone. At first, I thought it was just an innocent flirtation, but then he took his phone out of his pocket and showed me photos, messages, records, proving hotel meetings supposedly when James was on supply trips and Sophia was visiting suppliers for her new restaurant. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, anger mixed with my pain. "I wanted to be absolutely sure," Liam said, pushing his hair back with his hand. The gesture reminded me so much of his father. Then when I confirmed it, I thought maybe it would be better if you never knew. Maybe we could carry on. I had already ended it with Sophia in private, but to avoid a scandal that would hurt the inn, we decided to keep up appearances until the wedding and not tell anyone. And then what? I asked. My heart was pounding against my ribs. Then I found out something even worse, Liam said. His voice dropped to a whisper. A plan they have to sell the inn, the finances, and to throw us out of here. The world began to spin around me. 36 years of marriage, a lifetime built stone by stone with sacrifice, and it was all falling apart before my eyes on a single June morning. "Tell me everything," I said, wiping my tears with the back of my hand. "Don't hide anything anymore. I need to know exactly what we are up against." And so, as the sun rose over the shores of Key West, Florida, and the guests at our inn began to wake, my son fully explained to everyone the extent of the betrayal that threatened not only my marriage, but the legacy we had built over a lifetime. Liam took me to the office at the back of the inn, away from the main house, where James and Sophia were not. My legs felt heavy, as if I were wading through quicksand. The office was small but cold. It looked out onto the gardens I had carefully cultivated. How many hours had I spent here organizing reservations, planning menus, calculating expenses? This space, always my refuge, now felt strange, as if it belonged to another life, another person. Liam gently closed the door and took a large envelope out of a drawer that usually stayed locked. I never opened that drawer. It was his workspace where he kept documents related to the restaurant he planned to open after the wedding. "Sit down, Mum," he said softly, pulling a chair for me. His hands were trembling slightly, betraying the calm he was trying to maintain. Inside the envelope were dozens of documents, bank statements, contracts, business proposals, printed emails. Liam spread them systematically over the table as the knot in my stomach tightened. It all started when Sophia showed extreme interest in the inn's finances. He explained in a controlled voice. At first I thought it was just professional curiosity, a chef wanting to learn about the business. But then I realized her questions were very specific. Deeds, loan contracts, even insurance policies. He showed me a copy of the original contract of the inn. The property had been purchased over 30 years ago in James's and my name. Back then, it was just an old, dilapidated house, and we transformed it with our own hands. "Dad has been altering documents, Mom," Liam said. "He opened a company in his own name 2 years ago, without including you, and started transferring the properties to this new company." I felt the blood drain from my face. "How is that possible?" I signed. "No, you didn't," Liam gently interrupted, placing before me a stack of documents with what appeared to be my signature. "He forged your signature." Look closely, I examined the papers. My world crumbled once more. The signatures were almost perfect, but there were small differences only I would notice. The way I curved the E in grace, the pressure of the pen on the paper. "Why would he do that?" I whispered, struggling to comprehend the depth of this betrayal. Liam took a deep breath and continued. Sophia isn't who we thought she was. She never worked as a chef in Portugal. In fact, she worked for a real estate developer specializing in converting historic properties into luxury developments. He showed me photos of Sophia at corporate events in suits instead of the chef aprons I used to see her in when visiting our restaurant. They wanted to sell the inn. Mom, there's an offer from an international hotel chain interested in this land. The value is astronomical. The document he showed me stated an offer of 8.5 million Mexican pesos, or the equivalent in another currency. Let's keep the idea of an astronomical sum here. But the inn is our life, I murmured, feeling dizzy. Everything we built together? For us, yes, Liam said, his voice hardened with pain. For Dad, it apparently is just an asset to liquidate. And the wedding? I asked, as reality hit me in successive waves. It was all a sham. Liam nodded slowly. Sophia didn't meet me in Portugal by chance. She was sent to approach me when the developer discovered the inn. The plan was simple. Marry me to gain legal access to the family, help Dad transfer the assets to the new company without raising suspicion, and then, after the divorce, split the proceeds of the sale. And your father? I asked, barely able to get the words out. How did he get involved? I'm not sure when it started, Liam said, avoiding my gaze. But from the messages I found, it seems Sophia approached him first with the business proposal, and then things evolved. I think he was already dissatisfied, maybe bored with life here, dreaming of a luxurious retirement somewhere sunny. I remembered how James had often talked about friends who sold their businesses and moved to the coast or abroad. How he sighed when he saw reports about resorts on paradise beaches. I had always considered these comments harmless dreams, never imagining they could be the seeds of a real plan. And you learned all this 3 months ago, Liam continued. I found a document on Sophia's laptop when she left it open. It was a report to her superiors at the developer detailing the progress of the Posada de las Montañas project. There were photos of me, you, Dad, detailed descriptions of our routines, of the inn's finances. It looked like a spy dossier. I closed my eyes, trying to absorb the impact of each new revelation. This wasn't just a matter of marital infidelity. It was a carefully crafted conspiracy to steal not only my husband, but our family's legacy. What did you do when you discovered it? I asked. I confronted Sophia, Liam said, running his hand nervously through his hair. She denied it at first, but when I showed her the evidence, she changed tactics. She offered me a cut of the deal, said I could make a lot of money, start a new life anywhere in the world, open my own restaurant. And your father? Did you confront him too? Liam shook his head. I didn't have the courage, he admitted, shame in his voice. I kept up appearances, pretending to consider Sophia's offer to buy time while I gathered more evidence and tried to figure out how to protect you and the inn. I planned to cancel the wedding at the last minute, citing personal doubts. But I never imagined you would find out like this. From the office window, I looked at the inn James and I had built with love. Every stone, every floorboard, every rose in the garden told the story of our love, of our joint work. Or so I thought. What do we do now? I asked, feeling a cold determination replace the initial shock. Liam looked surprised. Perhaps he expected me to crumble completely. Mum, we still have time, he said, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. The final transfer of ownership is scheduled for after the wedding. Technically, the inn is still ours, if we act quickly. Then we will act, I cut in, straightening up. First, we need to talk to a lawyer today. I have a friend who specializes in real estate law, Liam said quickly. We can meet him discreetly in town. Good, I nodded. In the meantime, we need to carry on as if nothing happened. They must not know we found out, Liam looked at me with admiration and concern. Can you do that? Face Dad and Sophia, knowing what you know. I took a deep breath, feeling a strength I didn't know I had settled inside me. For 43 years, I've taken care of this family and this business. I won't let them destroy it all now. Just then, we heard footsteps approaching the office. Liam quickly gathered the documents, put them in the envelope, and put it back where it belonged. The door opened. There was James, my husband, the man I had loved for over 30 years, smiling as if nothing were wrong. "Ah, there you are," he said casually. "The guests are asking about breakfast, Grace." I forced a smile, a mask I never imagined I would need with him. "I'm coming right now, dear," I said. We were just looking at some wedding details with Liam. James nodded. His gaze flicked briefly to Liam and then back to me. Was there suspicion in those eyes I knew so well? Or was it just my imagination? "Come on, don't dawdle," he said as he left, closing the door. As his footsteps faded, Liam and I remained silent for a moment. "The game starts now," I murmured, adjusting my apron. "Their game. Only now we're in it too." The rest of that day passed like poison. I served breakfast to the guests with an automatic smile, answered questions about local attractions, and predicted the weather as I always did, all while I watched James and Sophia interact with others. Little looks, seemingly innocent touches, bolder, lingering glances, things I had never noticed before but were now blatant. How could I have been so blind? How had the man I shared a bed with for over 40 years been living a second life right under my nose, and I hadn't seen it? Around 2 o'clock, when the inn was briefly empty, guests had gone out to tour the city, Liam and I slipped away quietly. We told James we were going to check the flower arrangements for the wedding. We added one more lie to the web that now enveloped our family. Attorney Dr. Pablo Oliver's office was in an old building in the historic center of Key West, Florida. He was a middle-aged man with sharp eyes and a serious expression. He listened to our story with professional attention, occasionally taking notes or asking for clarifications. "Ms. Grace," he said finally, after we laid out the situation and presented the documents Liam had gathered. "What your husband has done constitutes fraud and forgery. Transfers of property carried out with your forged signature can be challenged and annulled. How long would that take?" I asked. "Court proceedings can take years," he admitted. "However, we can request immediate injunctive relief to prevent any further transfer of property." "And what about the money that has already been diverted?" Liam asked. Dr. Oliver sighed. "Tracing and recovering diverted funds is complicated, especially if they've been sent to offshore accounts or converted into other assets." A stab of despair hit me. "Then what do you suggest we do?" "The fastest approach," he said slowly, "would be to confront him with the evidence and negotiate a settlement. With what we have here, he would face serious criminal consequences. That gives you a strong position to negotiate." "I don't want to negotiate," I said firmly. "I want my inn back. I want to protect what we built." Dr. Oliver looked at me with a mix of admiration and concern. I understand, Ms. Grace. In that case, we need to act quickly and strategically. He laid out a plan of action. First, we would file a formal fraud complaint with the authorities. Simultaneously, we would initiate legal measures to freeze all assets of the company created by James and block any transactions involving the inn. This will create a legal barrier that will deter a sale, he explained. No serious buyer will proceed with a property tied up in litigation. And what about the wedding? I asked, looking at Liam. It's in 2 weeks. I won't marry her, Liam said categorically. But it might be wiser to maintain appearances until we have all the legal measures in place. Dr. Oliver considered for a moment. Postponement would be more prudent than an abrupt cancellation. A cancellation could alert them that something is wrong. I nodded, feeling the weight of 2 more weeks of pretending. And the police? Should we call them now? I'll prepare the complaint today, the lawyer replied. But the police investigation may take time. Our immediate priority is to protect the property. When we left the office 2 hours later, we carried a folder full of documents to sign and a detailed plan. The sky over Key West, usually so blue, was covered with heavy rain clouds that day. Are you okay, Mum? Liam asked as we walked to the car. No, I answered honestly, but I will be. He squeezed my hand. We'll get through this together. When we returned to the inn, we found Sophia in the kitchen, preparing what looked like a tasting for the wedding menu. When she saw us, she gave a bright smile. Ah, you're back. Please try the sauce I'm developing for the main course. I watched her with new eyes. The beauty I had once admired innocently now seemed calculated and predatory. The images of her in chef aprons were replaced in my mind by those photos of her in corporate suits at events. How did I not notice? I thought. It looks wonderful, I said, forcing a smile as I took a spoonful from the spoon she offered. You're very talented, Sophia. Thank you, Miss Grace, she replied, seeming genuinely pleased by the compliment. She was a consummate actress. I want everything to be perfect for our big day. Our big day. The words rang in my mind like an insult. By the way, Liam said, continuing his role with surprising ease, we were thinking of postponing the wedding for a few weeks. Sophia's smile faltered for a moment. Postpone? Why? Almost everything is ready. Aunt Emma had a fall, I improvised quickly. She's in the hospital in Florida. Since she's Liam's godmother, we'd like her to be able to attend. Sophia frowned, clearly annoyed but maintaining her composure. I'm sorry to hear that. Of course, we can consider a small postponement. We'll need to talk to the vendors, of course. I'll handle it, Liam said. It won't be more than a month. Before Sophia could answer, James walked into the kitchen. He was wearing the blue sweater I had knitted for him last winter. Seeing him in something my hands had crafted cut me like a knife. What are you all doing here? He asked jovially. This smells wonderful, Sophia. His eyes met hers briefly, and I saw what I had never noticed before. That complicit look, that silent communication between lovers. Liam wants to postpone the wedding, Sophia said, her voice controlled but with a trace of tension. Aunt Emma had an accident. James turned to Liam, surprise and something else, alarm, in his eyes. Seriously? This is the first I'm hearing of it. Why didn't you tell me earlier? We just got the call while we were in town, Liam replied calmly. It's nothing serious, but she'll need a few weeks to recover. James studied his son's face a moment too long, then nodded. Of course. It makes sense to wait. Emma has always been like a second mother to you. The air in the kitchen grew heavy with unspoken lies. I busied myself pretending to clean a countertop that was already spotless. I couldn't bear to look directly at James as he discussed the details of his son's sham wedding with his lover while planning to destroy everything we built. I'm going to check the rooms, I announced abruptly, needing to escape that farce before my facade crumbled. I quickly climbed the stairs to the room we shared for years with love, now no longer familiar, but foreign. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed myself to cry. Not only for the betrayal, but for the loss of what I thought we had. For the slow, silent death of a marriage that defined who I was for almost all my adult life. Outside, the rain finally began, washing the windows as if trying to cleanse the world. I cried for the end of my last autumn with James. The days that followed were a masterpiece of self-control. Every meal shared with James, every forced smile towards Sophia, every casual conversation about the future consumed me from within, but I kept the facade perfectly intact. At the same time, Liam and I worked discreetly with Dr. Oliver to put our plan into action. The documents were filed with the court on Monday morning. Injunctions were requested to block any transactions involving the inn. My name was removed from all joint bank accounts to prevent James from continuing to use my forged signature. The formal fraud complaint was registered with the police. Meanwhile, life at the inn continued. Guests came and went, oblivious to the drama unfolding beneath the surface of our supposed family harmony. Sophia seemed to accept the postponement, continuing her wedding preparations, though I noticed her growing restlessness. She made frequent private calls, always speaking in a low voice. 7 days after our discovery, while I was arranging linens in the linen closet, I heard voices coming from the guest room. The door was closed, but the walls of the old house weren't as thick as James and Sophia seemed to believe. "They're acting weird," Sophia was saying, her voice tense. "I'm sure something's wrong." "You're imagining things," James replied, but there was uncertainty in his voice. Grace has always been absent-minded, and as for Liam, he's just nervous about the wedding. "It's not just that," Sophia insisted. "Yesterday I saw Liam putting documents away when I walked into the office. He looked guilty. What do you want me to do?" There was clear irritation in James's voice. "Accuse my own son of conspiring against us?" "Let's speed up the plan," Sophia said after a moment of silence. "The buyers are getting impatient. If we wait much longer, they might back out. And the wedding, forget the wedding. It was only a means to an end. We can cancel it, invent some excuse. What matters is to finalize the sale before anything goes wrong." My heart raced. They were planning to move faster than we anticipated. I moved quietly away from the closet and went downstairs to find Liam at the reception desk, checking the reservation book. "We need to call Dr. Oliver now," I whispered after telling him what I heard. "They're going to try to sell the inn immediately." Liam took the phone and went out to make the call in private. He came back 20 minutes later, visible relief on his face. "The injunctions were approved this morning," he said quietly. "The inn is officially in legal dispute. Any attempt at sale will be automatically invalidated, and the police investigation is ongoing. But the chief wants to meet us tomorrow to take our formal statements." I nodded. feeling a mix of apprehension and determination. So, we're protected for now? Yes, but we need to be careful. If they realize we know, they'll run, I completed, taking with them everything they've managed to steal so far. That night, we all had dinner together in the kitchen after closing, as we sometimes did. I had prepared bacalao with potatoes, James's favourite dish. It was surreal to lovingly serve the man who planned to betray me in every way. It's delicious, Grace, James praised, savouring the dish as if nothing were wrong, as if he weren't living a lie. Thank you, I said automatically. It's your mother's recipe. Sophia watched our interaction carefully. You have such a beautiful story, she commented, her voice sweet as poison. 35 years? I can't imagine knowing someone that long. A whole lifetime, I agreed, meeting her eyes. We built every piece of this in together, brick by brick. Sometimes I think the walls themselves hold our memories. I saw a slight discomfort pass over James's face. Was it guilt, or just irritation at my inconvenient sentimentality? Speaking of the inn, he said, changing the subject, I was thinking maybe it's time for some renovations. Modernize a bit, maybe expand. My eyes met Liam's. This was the beginning of the trap. What kind of renovations? I asked innocently, serving myself a little more salad. Nothing drastic, James replied, gesturing vaguely with his fork. But I've been talking to some investors interested in properties in the region. Tourism in Florida is growing, and we could capitalize on that with some strategic improvements. Investors, huh? I said, keeping my voice neutral while my heart sped up. That's new to me. Just preliminary talks? He added quickly. Nothing concrete yet. Sophia chimed in with artificial enthusiasm. It would be wonderful. We'd keep the rustic charm, of course, but add some luxury amenities. Spa, maybe a heated pool. A pool would completely change the character of the inn, I observed calmly. We've always taken pride in offering an authentic experience, not a generic resort. Times are changing, Mom, Sophia said in a slightly condescending tone that made me grip the fork tighter. Today's tourists want comfort and luxury, even in rustic destinations. Interesting that you're so sure what tourists want, I replied, allowing a bit of my true voice to show. Considering you're a chef, not a hospitality specialist. An awkward silence fell over the table. Liam cleared his throat. Actually, I was thinking that maybe we should consider registering the inn as a historic landmark. The building is over 100 years old, and that could give us tax benefits, as well as protect its original architecture. I saw a flash of panic in James's and Sophia's eyes before they controlled their expressions. A historic landmark? James shook his head. That would bring all kinds of restrictions on what we can do with the property. It sounds like a bureaucratic nightmare. I think it's a fascinating idea, I insisted, supporting my son. After all, we want to preserve what we built here, don't we? For future generations, James looked at me for a long time, and for a moment I saw something in his eyes that reminded me of the man I used to love. A hesitation, perhaps even remorse. But it disappeared so quickly, I questioned whether it had really been there. Sure, he said. We can explore all the options. After dinner, while Sophia offered to wash the dishes, another small part of her flawless future daughter-in-law act, James asked me to walk in the garden. The night was cold. The moon shone beyond the distant sea. You've been distant lately, he commented as we walked among my roses. Have I? I replied, watching my breath form little clouds in the cold air. Maybe I'm just tired. Organizing a wedding is exhausting. It's more than that. He stopped, turning to face me. In the dim moonlight, his face looked older, more marked by the lines of time. You're different, more reserved. People change, James, I said softly. Sometimes we learn things that transform us. What things? There was a note of apprehension in his voice now. For a moment, I considered confronting him right there in the garden I planted with my own hands, ripping off the mask and forcing him to face his lies. But it wasn't the right time. The plan wasn't complete. Nothing specific, I said, turning my gaze to the distant waters. Maybe the weight of the years makes us think about what truly matters in life. He nodded slowly, seeming temporarily relieved, but still distrustful. You know I love you, don't you? The words that had been my comfort and joy for decades now sounded hollow and false, like an actor poorly reciting his lines. I know, I lied. The words were bitter on my tongue. That night, lying beside James in the bed we had shared for nearly half a century, I stayed awake, listening to his breathing. How was it possible to sleep so peacefully next to someone while planning to destroy everything that person loved? What kind of emptiness existed inside him that allowed such duplicity? And more disturbing still, what did that say about me? About how I hadn't perceived the falseness growing beside me all those years? The next morning, Liam and I left early to meet Chief Ethan at the local precinct. He was a big man with keen eyes and an expression that suggested he had already seen every kind of human deceit. Forgery, falsification of documents, diversion of assets, he enumerated after examining our documents. We have enough elements to open a formal investigation. How long will that take? I asked, aware that time was running out. Financial investigations are complex, Miss Grace, he answered honestly. They would normally take weeks, maybe months, but considering the circumstances and the possibility that the suspects might try to leave the country, we can expedite the process. They plan to finalize the sale soon, Liam said, possibly in the coming days. The chief nodded gravely. In that case, we need to act quickly. I have two options for you. He explained that we could proceed with the more cautious approach, continue the investigation discreetly, gathering more evidence to build a stronger case. Or we could opt for immediate intervention, with the police showing up at the inn to formally notify James and Sophia that their activities were under investigation. The second option may alert them, cause them to destroy evidence or attempt to flee, the chief warned. On the other hand, it may prevent them from concluding the sale. Liam and I looked at each other, weighing our options. We have measures blocking all transactions involving the property, I said finally. Yes, the chief confirmed. But determined people can find loopholes, fake documents, unregistered transfers. I've seen it all. I took a deep breath, feeling the responsibility of the decision on my shoulders. On the one hand, the idea of James and Sophia being officially confronted had a certain appeal, an immediate sense of justice. On the other hand, if they were alerted prematurely, they might escape with the money they had already diverted. Let's continue with the discreet investigation, I decided at last, but with maximum urgency. Meanwhile, we'll keep up the charade at home. Are you sure you can do that? Liam asked, his concern evident. Continue living with them as if you know nothing. I built this inn with my own hands, I said, lifting my chin. I can endure a few more days of lies to save it. On the way back, Liam drove in silence, lost in his own thoughts. The sea breeze made the palms sway, creating a melancholic scene that matched my mood. "What are you thinking?" I finally asked. Liam sighed deeply. "That we never really know people. Not even those closest to us. Your father wasn't always like this," I said, surprised by my own need to defend the man who had betrayed me so completely. There was a time when he truly loved the inn, when the dream was as much his as mine. When do you think he changed? I reflected on the question, trying to identify the moment my husband began to grow distant, to dream of another life. Maybe when the inn really started to succeed 5 years ago, I said slowly. Paradoxically, the more we prospered, the less satisfied he seemed, as if the realized dream had lost its shine. Liam nodded in understanding. "And Sophia, how did you not notice anything?" The question hurt, but it was fair. I think when you live with someone for so long, you start to see them through a lens you created yourself, I said after a moment. You no longer see the real person, but the version that exists in your mind. And as for Sophia, I shook my head. She played the role of loving future daughter-in-law perfectly. I wanted to believe you had found someone special. When we arrived at the inn, we saw a sleek black sedan with tinted windows parked at the entrance. Liam and I exchanged anxious looks before going in. In the living room, James was sitting with two men in suits, papers spread out on the coffee table. When he saw us, he stood up quickly, a guilty surprise on his face. "Grace, Liam, I didn't expect you back so soon." "Apparently," I said, looking at the papers on the table, "we're interrupting something." The taller man, grey hair perfectly trimmed, impeccable suit, stood and held out his hand. "Señora Perez, a pleasure to meet you. I'm Marcus Barrios from Horizonte Emprendimientos." I shook his hand mechanically, feeling a chill. "Horizonte Emprendimientos?" "Yes," he explained smoothly. "We're discussing some investment possibilities for the property. Your husband mentioned you were considering a substantial renovation." "How interesting," I said, looking directly at James, who seemed to be trying to communicate something with his eyes, a silent plea for me to play along. I don't recall having finalized such a decision. The second man, younger with a calculating expression, chimed in. "In fact, ma'am, we're proposing a full partnership. Horizonte would assume management of the property, transforming it into a luxury boutique resort, while you would maintain a minority stake." "A minority stake," I repeated slowly, "in the inn I built from scratch." The air in the room grew tense. Liam stepped closer, placing a protective hand on my shoulder. "Gentlemen," he said with surprising composure, "we appreciate the interest in our family business, but I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. The inn is not for sale, nor are we seeking external partners." At this time, Marcus Barrios seemed genuinely surprised. "Your father gave us to understand that the family was united in this decision." "My father," Liam answered coldly, "does not speak for the whole family." James shifted uncomfortably, clearly unprepared for this confrontation. "Liam, Grace, can we discuss this in private? Mr. Marcus and Mr. Cole travelled from Mexico City especially for this meeting." "I'm sorry for the inconvenience," I replied, my voice firm. "But as my son said, there's nothing to discuss. The inn is not for sale." At that moment, Sophia entered the room, momentarily startled to see us there. She quickly recovered, smiling gracefully. Ah, you've met the representatives from Horizonte. Isn't it a fascinating proposal? The ease with which she inserted herself into the conversation, assuming the role of someone entitled to a say in the inn's future, ignited something inside me. An anger that had been simmering slowly was now ready to burst into flame. "Sophia," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "why don't you show the gentlemen our garden while I make some coffee? I'm sure they'd like to see the property before they leave." She hesitated, her eyes flicking quickly to James, who nodded subtly. "Of course," she said, regaining her composure. "This way, gentlemen." As soon as they left, I turned to James, not even bothering to hide my fury. "How dare you try to sell our inn behind my back?" James raised his hands in a placating gesture. "Grace, it's not what it seems. We're just exploring options. Nothing has been decided yet. Don't lie to me." The words came out louder than I intended. They spoke of a minority stake. That's not exploring options. That's negotiating the sale of our home. Liam stepped between us, as always the mediator. "Dad? What is really going on here?" James ran his hand over his face, suddenly looking much older and more tired. "It's complicated." "Then explain," Liam demanded, "because from our point of view it seems quite simple. You're trying to sell the inn without consulting my mother, the legal co-owner." For a moment I thought James was going to confess everything. I saw the struggle in his eyes, the weight of the lies finally becoming too heavy. But then, like a curtain falling, the vulnerability disappeared, replaced by a cold determination. "I'm doing what's best for all of us," he declared. "This inn has been draining our lives for decades. We're getting old, Grace. I don't want to spend my last years changing sheets and fixing pipes." "So that's it?" I asked incredulously. "You're tired. So you decide to throw away everything we built." "It's not throwing it away," he insisted. "It's evolving. Marcus's offer is generous, enough money for us to retire comfortably, maybe even buy that beach house you always wanted." I shook my head, amazed at his ability to distort reality. "I never wanted a beach house, James. That was always your dream, not mine." Our eyes locked, and in that moment I realized the extent of the chasm between us. It wasn't just about infidelity or financial conspiracy. It was about the fact that after 35 years together, my husband didn't really know me. "This conversation isn't over," I said finally, pulling myself together. "But right now we have guests to attend to. Unwanted guests, but still." I left to prepare the promised coffee in the kitchen, leaving James and Liam in a heavy silence. As the water boiled, I looked out the window toward the garden, where Sophia was proudly showing the roses to the executives from Horizonte. Roses I had planted, watered, and pruned over decades. The ease with which she claimed my work, my life, as if it were hers, was astonishing. At that moment, I made a decision. The time for pretending was over. It was time to end this game once and for all. The days that followed were almost unbearably tense. After the executives from Horizonte left, visibly confused by the contradictory messages from the family, pretending normality became even more difficult. James was nervous, constantly checking his phone and making private calls. Sophia alternated between being excessively solicitous with me and distant, spending long periods locked in the guest room. Liam, Dr. Oliver, and Chief Ethan and I were in constant contact. The investigation was advancing quickly. with forensic experts analyzing the forged documents and tracking suspicious financial transfers. Secret offshore bank accounts were uncovered, concrete evidence of James's long-term plan. On the fourth day after the confrontation with the executives from Horizonte, while I was in town buying supplies for the inn, I received an urgent call from Dr. Oliver. "Ms. Grace." His voice was urgent. "We believe your husband and Miss Sophia are planning to leave the country." My heart sped up. "How do you know?" "We found tickets purchased in their names for Madrid, departing tomorrow night, and there was a large transfer this morning from one of the offshore accounts to a Spanish bank." "They're fleeing," I whispered, gripping the shopping cart to steady myself. "I'm afraid so. Chief Ethan is preparing arrest warrants, but they won't be ready before tomorrow. If they suspect we're closing in, they may disappear tonight." "What should I do?" "Go home and act normally," he instructed. "Don't let it show that you know anything." "The chief is sending a plainclothes officer to discreetly watch the inn from outside in case they try to leave before we can execute the warrants." I finished my shopping mechanically, my mind racing to process what was happening. James hadn't only betrayed me emotionally and financially, he planned to abandon me completely, fleeing to another country with my future daughter-in-law and the money we had built together over a lifetime. When I returned to the inn, I found a scene of apparent normality. James was at the reception, attending to a couple who had just arrived. Sophia was in the kitchen, apparently preparing something for dinner. Everything seemed perfectly ordinary, except that it was entirely false. "I need your help with the luggage," James said when he saw me, smiling at the guests. "Our new friends will be staying in the pink room." I forced a smile, and we carried the couple's suitcases to the room. When we were alone in the hallway, James turned to me. "I was thinking we could go out to dinner tonight," he said casually. "Just the two of us. It's been a long time since we had a moment alone." The unexpected invitation took me by surprise. For a moment, I almost believed it could be genuine. Perhaps a last flicker of the man I loved trying to re-emerge. But then I remembered the tickets to Madrid, the bank transfer, the systematic betrayal. "That would be lovely," I replied just as casually. "But we have guests arriving early tomorrow. Maybe another time we can go." I saw a flicker of frustration in his eyes before he nodded, accepting my excuse. He was trying to get me away from the inn tonight, to make their final preparations for escape easier. That evening I found Liam in the linen storeroom, where we could talk without being heard. I told him about the tickets and the bank transfer. "They're going to flee," he confirmed my fears. "Probably tonight, since the tickets are for tomorrow." "Your father invited me to dinner out," I added. "I think he's trying to get me away from the inn." Liam shook his head, disgust evident on his face. "We must tell the chief." "I already did," I said. "A plainclothes officer is watching the property, but without the warrants they can't do anything unless they witness a crime being committed." "Then we have to catch them red-handed," Liam decided. That night, we made a simple plan. I would pretend to change my mind about dinner, giving James and Sophia the impression the inn would be free for whatever preparations they needed to make. Liam would hide in the office, from where he could discreetly observe the main house. I would go out with James, but forget my purse, giving me an excuse to return unexpectedly. If we caught them trying to flee or removing documents, we would have witnesses and the plainclothes officer to confirm their intentions. As the night approached, A strange calm enveloped me. After days of pretenses and anguish, the idea that everything would end soon, in one way or another, brought a kind of peace. I put on the purple dress James had always liked. I did my makeup nicely. I gathered my grey hair into a simple bun. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. Who was this woman looking back at me? She seemed both familiar and strange. The same brown eyes that had seen so much love and betrayal. The same mouth that had smiled with joy and now set with determination. "You will get through this," I whispered to my reflection. "You've survived worse." James was waiting for me in the living room, formally dressed, with a bouquet of roses from my own garden in his hand. My throat tightened. "You look beautiful," he said, handing me the flowers. "Thank you," I replied, accepting them mechanically. "Let me put them in water before we go." In the kitchen, I found Sophia preparing something that smelled deliciously of garlic and wine. "Are you going out?" she asked with a sweet smile. "Have fun. Don't worry about anything here. I'll take care of it all. I'm sure you will," I thought bitterly, but I only smiled in response. As we approached the door, I played my part. "Oh, I forgot my purse," I exclaimed. "Start the car." "I'll be right back." I ran back to the room, grabbed my purse, then took a long detour to the office where Liam was hiding. "We're leaving now," I whispered. "Keep your eyes on them." He nodded, his face serious. "Be careful, Mum. If you sense anything strange, don't confront him alone." "I won't confront him," I promised. "We'll just follow the plan." The restaurant James chose was elegant and quiet, about 15 minutes by car from the inn. On the way, he seemed oddly nostalgic, recalling the early years of the inn, the difficulties we faced together, the moments of joy when we began to succeed. If I didn't know more, I'd say he was trying to say goodbye. We took a candlelit table in the corner and a bottle of red wine he ordered without opening the menu. "My favourite," I noted. The familiarity of the gesture hurt more than it should have. "Grace," he said, after the waiter poured the wine. "I know things have been complicated between us lately." "Complicated," I echoed, keeping my tone neutral as I took a small sip of wine. "That's one way to describe it." He sighed, running a hand through his greying hair, a gesture so familiar it made me feel a pang of nostalgia despite everything. "I want you to know that despite everything, the years we spent together were the best of my life." The sincerity in his voice almost made me falter. "Almost." "How convenient for you to say that now," I replied, setting my glass down a bit harder than necessary. After spending months secretly working to sell our inn behind my back. The surprise on his face seemed genuine. "Grace, it's not that simple." "Then explain," I challenged. "Explain why you're trying to destroy everything we built together." He looked around nervously, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation in a public place. "This isn't the place for that discussion." "When would be the right place, James? After you finalized the sale? Or perhaps after you fled to Portugal with the money?" His pupils dilated in shock. For a moment, he seemed completely speechless. Then, slowly, understanding replaced surprise on his face. "You know," he said finally, not as a question, but a statement. "I know everything," I confirmed, keeping my voice low but firm. "About Sophia, about the shell company you created, about the bank transfers, the forgeries, the plan to sell the inn, and about the tickets to Madrid for tomorrow night." He visibly paled. his hand trembling around the wine glass. How? It doesn't matter, I said. What matters is that it's over. Right now, the police are preparing arrest warrants for you and Sophia. The accounts have been frozen. The inn is under legal protection against any attempt at sale. He looked like a drowning man, desperately seeking something to hold on to. Grace, you don't understand. I was going to tell you everything eventually. I was going to give you a fair share. A fair share? I said, incredulous. Of what is legally half mine, of the inn we built with our blood, sweat, and tears. How generous of you. I made a mistake, he admitted, his voice breaking. I got lost somewhere. Sophia came with those ideas, those promises of a better, easier life. Don't you dare blame her, I warned. You're a grown man who made his own decisions, decisions that shattered our family. He lowered his head, defeated. What do you want, Grace? I want you to think of Liam, I said firmly. Your son you were prepared to abandon without a word. I want you to face the consequences of your actions like a man, not a coward fleeing in the middle of the night. It's too late for that, he whispered. Things have been set in motion that I can't simply undo. At that moment, my phone vibrated. It was a message from Liam. They're here. Sophia is packing. Police on the way. My heart raced. The message didn't make sense. Sophia should have been at the inn, but who were they? I need to go to the bathroom, I said abruptly, standing up. In the private corridor near the bathrooms, I called Liam. What's happening? 2 men arrived 10 minutes ago, he said, his voice tense and low. They're not the ones from Horizonte. Sophia welcomed them as if she were expecting them. They're removing documents from the office and loading suitcases into their car. And the plainclothes officer? I just notified him. He called for backup, but he said we shouldn't interfere until they arrive. I'll be there in 20 minutes, I decided. Don't do anything reckless. I returned to the table, trying to control my expression. I need to get back to the inn, I said, as I grabbed my purse. I forgot important instructions for a guest arriving late today. James looked at me suspiciously. Now, in the middle of dinner? It's an emergency, I insisted. You can stay and finish your meal if you like. A dark understanding passed over his face. You know something is happening at the inn right now, don't you? I didn't answer. I just faced him firmly. I'm coming with you, he said, dropping the napkin on the table and signalling the waiter to pay the bill. The drive back was tense and silent. James was driving too fast, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. I looked out the window at the lights of the houses passing by, each one harbouring stories and lives we would never know. How many other marriages hid secrets as deep as ours? When we arrived at the entrance to the inn, we saw the flashing lights of 2 police cars. James braked sharply, his face a mask of panic. Grace, he pleaded, turning to me. It's not too late. We can fix this. Do you really believe that? I asked softly. Some things, once broken, can no longer be repaired. I got out of the car and walked toward the inn, feeling James follow a few steps behind. In the front garden, a dismal scene was unfolding. Sophia was being placed in the back of a police car, while 2 men I had never seen before were handcuffed and leaning against another police car. Liam came toward me. I'm glad you got here safely, he said. They were taking everything. Documents, money, even some of your jewelry. Jewelry? I repeated, confused. A police officer near the chief held up a plastic bag containing the pearl necklace my mother had given me, the earrings James had given me on our 18th wedding anniversary, the ruby brooch that had belonged to my grandmother, small personal treasures that meant far more than their monetary value. Chief Ethan approached us and then turned to James. James remained frozen, horror on his face. As the chief approached him, he didn't offer the slightest resistance. "James Perez," the chief said formally, "you are being detained for investigation of fraud, forgery of documents, and diversion of assets. You have the right to remain silent." As his rights were read, James looked at me one last time. There was something in his eyes, not just fear or regret, but something deeper. Perhaps the late understanding of what he had thrown away. "I'm sorry," he murmured as he was led into the patrol car. I stood there in the garden I had tended for decades, watching my husband of 35 years being taken away by the police. The roses I had planted with such love now witnessed the end of my marriage. A cool breeze blew, making the flowers sway as if saying goodbye. Liam put a protective arm around my shoulders. "Are you okay, Mom?" "No," I said honestly, "but I will be." The months that followed were an emotional roller coaster. The case turned into a small local scandal. Respected inn owner betrayed by husband, conspiring with son's fake bride. Sophia was charged not only with fraud related to the inn, but also with embezzlement at her former job. The two men caught at the inn were her accomplices, hired to help with the escape and the transfer of stolen goods. After perceiving the weight of the evidence against him, James made a deal with the prosecutor, confessing his crimes in exchange for a reduced sentence. I learned that he had diverted nearly $2 million over the years, hidden in offshore accounts. With the help of the lawyers and the justice system, we managed to recover most of the money. The divorce was finalized in record time, given the circumstances. The inn remained entirely mine, as did the recovered accounts. James was sentenced to 6 years in prison, of which he would probably serve less than 2 in a semi-open regime, where the old ones were destroyed. I put the letter in my pocket and stood up, ready to return to the inn, my inn, where Liam would be waiting to discuss the expansion plans we had begun to develop. The life I knew had ended in an autumn, but another life, unexpected and yet to be discovered, was just beginning, and this time it would be entirely mine. Now, if you liked this story, click on the next video appearing on the screen, because in it there's a story of betrayal and uprising like you've never seen before.